Now, I'm pleased to introduce Akila Madara, who will be speaking about microbial medicine. Akila is a high school student from New Jersey and an all-around science enthusiast. She particularly enjoys reading and researching computational biology and data science, and has been involved with research in this space since her sophomore year. Akila believes in the importance of empowering youth to pursue science and create change in their communities. She will be presenting a talk that centers around the intersection of the gut-brain axis and depression treatment. Sounds absolutely fascinating. Over to you, Akila.
Yeah, thank you so much, Annika, for the introduction. Hello, everyone. My name is Akila Mahidara, and I'm a senior in high school from the United States. Thank you so much for having me. And before I begin, I'd like to thank Youth STEM 2030 for giving me the opportunity to present my research on such a great platform. And also, I'd like to thank all of you who are tuning into this conference today. I hope you find this topic just as interesting as I do. So without further ado, my project is titled Analyzing the Role of the Gut Microbiome in Combating Depression. Now, I know at first glance, there doesn't seem to be too much of a correspondence between these two topics. I mean, there doesn't really seem to be even that much relationship between the gut microbiome and mental health. Those were my feelings exactly when I began this research. However, to get a better idea of this relationship, we need to delve deeper into something called the gut-brain axis. In short, the gut-brain axis, or GBA, as you might hear it called, is a bidirectional network of communication between the gastrointestinal tract and the nervous system. Specifically, there is a growing body of evidence pointing to this idea that certain intestinal bacteria has a definite impact on people's cognitive abilities as well as their overall mental health. Let's dig a little bit deeper. A few moments ago, I mentioned the nervous system. However, it's important to note that much like many other processes within the human body, the nervous system is incredibly more intricate than it sounds at first. Within this hierarchy of nervous systems that you see on your screen, I'd like to direct your attention over to the autonomic nervous system, or the ANS. The ANS is constantly running thousands of automatic functions such as regulating blood pressure and digestion. The division of the ANS that is most relevant today to my talk today is the enteric nervous system, which governs the functions of the gastrointestinal tract. The enteric nervous system also contains something called the vagus nerve, which is one of the most complex and wide-reaching nerves in the human body, as you can see highlighted in yellow throughout this diagram. The vagus nerve also directs the brain to the gut, which can be seen along the yellow line. New research also continues to point towards the idea that intestinal microbiome within the gut produces neurotransmitters that communicate with the brain via pathways such as the vagus nerve. This link also plays a very significant role in the onset of disease. Specifically for my project, however, I wanted to focus on the relationship between the gut microbiome and mental illness, such as depression. Given the distinctive link between these two systems, there are definitely a variety of ways that this causation can occur. First of all, the intestinal microbiome is responsible for producing neurotransmitters such as serotonin, dopamine, and gamma-aminobutyric acid, or GABA. These neurotransmitters are essential for mood regulation, and an imbalance in their production could lead to depressive symptoms. Another causation between the gut microbiome and depression is the inflammation of the gut, also known as leaky gut syndrome. This inflammation could trigger an immune response, as well as the onset of depression if this condition is left untreated for a long period of time. These causations have intrigued me for a long time, and I wanted to find a creative way to study how different configurations of the gut microbiome could impact depression risk and severity. So in order to tackle such a broad topic and a broad relationship, I decided to take a machine learning approach. In order to analyze such a broad relationship, I would need to look at so much data in order to gain an accurate understanding of the correspondence between the gut microbiome and its relation to depression risk and severity. So I decided to work on developing a predictive mathematical model that identifies gut microbial signatures associated with depression risk. That is definitely a lot of jargon for one sentence, so we should definitely break that down further. So the first step in completing a machine learning research project is to collect relevant data that can be used to train the model on. To begin with, I collected gut microbiome profiling data from a variety of sources, from very broad sources such as NCBI, or the National Center for Biotechnology Information, as well as very specific sources such as GMRepo, which stands for the Gut Microbiome Repository. And this variety of sources from a variety of different specificities enables this project to be more accurate in its understanding. And in order to identify the relationship between this data that I'm finding about the gut microbiome and its relationship to depression risk and severity, I've also looked on many databases that have clinical metadata regarding depression. And one of them that I found very helpful was the clinicaltrials.gov, which was very accurate in its portrayal of the depression data. So after I found all this data and collected it, and I had to find a way to pre-process this data in order to make it more accurate and relevant towards my study. So again, it's very important to have accurate data in machine learning because it reduces bias and also makes the project more relevant and accurate. So an example of how I'm doing this is by cropping unnecessary and confusing sequences out of the gut microbiome rRNA data. So as you can see here, on the top, we have an unclean sequence, an example of an unclean sequence that you might find. And as you can see, the peaks of the sequence are overlapping and confusing and difficult to read. And this makes it very difficult to feed into a machine learning model and to use it for an accurate portrayal of a relationship. However, on the bottom, you can see that this is a much cleaner picture of the data and possibly a lot more accurate and easier to read. And this is an example of a piece of data that I would use, and this is an example of something that I would cut out in order to make this project as readable and understandable as possible. And in order to do this, I've also been categorizing data in terms of nucleotide sequences, in terms of length and average quality of the data. And I've been using bioinformatics tools such as FastQC in order to test the accuracy of these sequences. Now, it's important to understand that this project is still in the works, and I'm still working on completing the predictive mathematical model. So what's next? The next step of this project for me is to build a machine learning model using something called a random forest classification algorithm. Essentially, what this algorithm does is it allows you to break up the dataset that you feed into it into smaller, more manageable datasets. And this makes it more accurate and reduces the variability within your experiment. And therefore, this random forest model has been reputably one of the most accurate and effective ways to handle microbiome data, which is exactly what I'm doing. So that is why I have decided to carry out this experiment using a random forest classification algorithm. And the next step of this project will be to train and validate this model on the data that I've collected, as well as to interpret the results using appropriate statistical metrics. And this will make sure that the model that I've produced is accurate and unbiased and can allow me to further understand the significance biologically of the gut microbiome data in the context of depression risk and severity. This is an effective way of leveraging a wide range of data in order to bolster existing claims of the relationship between the gut microbiome and its pointing towards depression risk and severity in patients. Now, why exactly is this research important, and what impacts can it make on the field of healthcare and psychology? I hope that this research can be at least a small step towards creating personalized depression treatments. Right now, the blanket treatments that we have for depression, such as antidepressants, are simply not making the cut because depression is a heterogeneous disorder that manifests itself in many different ways, and each person has different symptoms and a different experience when it comes to depression. So therefore, blanket treatments or one-size-fits-all treatments are not enough to be an effective way to combat depression. Therefore, it would be much more impactful and much more effective if we looked at something so unique to a specific person, such as their configuration of their gut microbiome, and using this to determine their risk of depression. And this, in turn, would be one small step into creating tailored, personalized precision medicine for each person who is struggling with depression. And of course, this is a very lofty goal. And I know that it's a very daunting challenge that many researchers and healthcare professionals are taking on. But I believe that this research can at least be a small step, a small amount of progress towards this overarching goal. And I believe that studying predictive biomarkers and microbial signatures is a very effective way of reaching this goal. And I'd also like to point out that this research project is centered around the third UN Sustainable Development Goal, which is number 3, good health and well-being. And although when people think of good health and well-being, their first inclination might be to physical health and the elimination of physical disease. However, it's very important to also recognize that mental health plays such an important role in a person's good health and well-being, and there is such a distinctive link between a person's physical well-being and their mental well-being. So we have to find more creative and innovative ways to study mental health and its relationship to physical health. And I hope that this project took a small step towards starting a conversation about destigmatizing mental health in the healthcare space, and also to understand that there is not always one way to come to the solution for a problem. So I hope to continue this research and build the predictive mathematical model that I hypothesized in this presentation. I find the gut-brain axis very interesting, and I think it is a very viable pathway into further studies about combating depression. Again, there is not always one way to find a solution to any healthcare problem, and I think this studying the gut-brain axis and its relationship to the neurotransmitters that create mental health disorders in our brains are it's a very different and unique way to solve this problem. And I hope that learning about the gut microbiota and mental health was an interesting way to start a new conversation. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, Akila, for speaking today. You gave amazing insight into the nexus between the gut-brain axis and depression treatment. And it is my pleasure now to facilitate a Q&A. So if you have a question for Akila, please feel free to comment it in the chat. And just a forewarning, I apologize in advance if I mispronounce your name. I'm awful with names. So our first question, which I will just be picking at random, is from Rima Zeno. She asks, if we were ill or if we have a disease in our stomach, does that necessarily impact our mental health?
Yeah, thank you, Rima, for your question. I think it's also important to highlight that our gut isn't the only factor that's related to creating disease. However, it does play a significant role, but it's also important to note that there are so many other factors that contribute to your mental health, such as your genetic disposition and the factors of your daily life and your habits. So the gut does play a significant role in maintaining your homeostasis and also contributing to your mental health, but it is one of many factors.
Awesome. Godfrey Jr. T. Membauer would like to ask you for some online programs or courses that you might have used to gain information for your presentation.
Yeah, of course. Honestly, I've mostly just used, I've just done a ton of research and a ton of reading, a ton of just searching things up. Like, I think it's one of the most difficult things about starting a research project is just that, it's just starting. So I would just try to scour the internet, scour books, libraries for as much information as you can find, and also reading other research projects and that other people have done. And I think that can give you a good background to starting your own project and getting curious about something you're interested in.
Excellent. So Vari Nakien asks, what are your future plans for your project? I know you spoke quite a bit about that in your presentation, but perhaps like a summary of your future plans would be good.
For sure. So as I mentioned before, I'm still in the data pre-processing stage of this project. So I'm still working with the data and trying to tailor it so that it's relevant and accurate for building a machine learning model that I will use to leverage the data that I found. and possibly find new biological significance for the gut microbiome data and to find its relationship to depression risk.
Sounds good. Nilo Mason asks, if it turns out there is a strong link between gut and depression, what will that mean for humanity?
Mostly, I think I'm not sure if my project specifically can be some sort of great scientific breakthrough. So many people have already looked at this and from a microbiology standpoint. However, I chose to take a sort of different approach by using computer science. And this link, eventually, what I hope for it to be is to create new precision medicine, possibly, and to find more effective ways to handle depression for different patients so that we can have a better understanding of the disease itself.
Thank you. Great response. Our next question is Kim Francesca De La Torre asks, is the project cost effective?
For me, yes, it has been because I have mainly been using public databases and I've been using like my own prior knowledge and research and basically the internet just to make this project. So it's all been virtual. So for me, yes, it has been cost effective because it's mostly just off of public data.
Our next question is Alina Sarakaya asks, what inspired you to start this project?
I've always been very interested in computer science, and recently I've started to think more about the biological standpoint that I can use to leverage computer science to create breakthroughs in biology, and that's the field computational biology that I'm very interested in going into in the future. So I've just been doing a lot of reading and a lot of looking at other people's research projects and that sort of inspired me to start to take on this research.
Sounds good. So Noma Gugu Precious Nguyen asks, what background or basic knowledge did you use to take on this project?
Mostly it's just been stuff that I've learned in school and stuff that I've done in prior research projects. Last summer I worked with a local university to analyze data about duckweed, which is a freshwater algae that can be easily extracted and found. So I feel like that gave me the basis and the confidence I needed to take on my own independent research project. So I would suggest that going from like a more structured university standpoint to working on your own is definitely a very good pathway.
Awesome. So our next question is from Praise Singano, and she would like to ask you which organizations you aspire to work with in the future.
That's a good question. I definitely would. I mean, it would be great to work with the National Institute of Health and as a computational biologist for them, and possibly like any other big healthcare organizations or pharmaceuticals, because I feel like there's such a big boom sort of in that field as of late, and it would be really inspiring to be able to work with people in that field to create new leaps in personalized medicine.
Sounds good. And thank you, Vari, for letting us know that this is reaching the end of our Q&A. Thank you so much, Akila, for sharing your thoughts. I found it especially inspiring how you talked about the nexus between the gut-brain axis and mental health and all the implications it has for both psychology, biology, computational biology, and a myriad of other fields. So Akila can also be found at akila.mo06 on Instagram if you would like to connect with her. And please join me in thanking Akila by sharing her appreciation in the chat.